welcome to Book World, The Great Escape. I'm author CJ Clifton, and today we have a special guest with us, author DC Gomez. Welcome, DC.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We are too. Sorry we were sick last week. That's my fault. Went to Comic-Con. I've been dealing with an upper respiratory issue, so my voice may be going in and out, so it's going to be kind of fun. So, DC, we're going to be talking about urban fantasy today, but before we get there, Mike, you have some author stuff coming up?
Yeah, my first author event of the year is going to be actually tomorrow at the Longview Artwork, weather permitting. We don't get blown away. I think it's supposed to rain in the morning and clear off by the afternoon time. So we do that. They have 4 quarterly art walks. It's held in downtown Longview, and it's really an art festival. Everything from crafts, books, artwork. It's in old downtown Longview, and generally there's a lot of people there, and if the weather's okay, it's usually a fantastic experience for everyone, from children all the way to adults. So we'll be in the Veribank lobby. We prefer to be the inside instead of the outside, and normally I'm there with Patty Wiseman. I think she's going down to the art museum. That's where she'll be at. So there's other authors that'll be there as well beside myself. But anyway, it kicks off the 2026, and from this point forward, I guess we'll be having stuff either pretty much every week or every other week. So looking forward to hopefully a good start to the year.
Sounds like fun. I know Chautauqua Festival should be coming up here in April. I know that should be coming up, as far as that is in the Longview Public Library. I believe that is in April.
Chautauqua, yeah.
Yeah, I know Kilgore Geekend is, I believe, the first weekend in May is normally scheduled in there. So shout out to Kilgore Geekend. And I know that East Texas Comic-Con is mid-July. That's one of mine that I'll be at. I know Piney Woods is at the end of August, and that's in Lufkin. So that's another one I will be coming at. So those are a few things to scratch up on your calendar. So heads up to those. So lots of things coming up in the near future to mark on your calendar. So DC, we're going to be talking urban. For those who don't know what urban fantasy is, I'm explaining to those what urban fantasy is.
Sure. So urban fantasy is modern day fantasy. I guess that's the best way to put it. So think of magical elements in the current environment. Ideally, it should be a city. So that's the urban part. It could be a small city. It doesn't have to be a major metropolis. It could be a small one. But it's all the things that takes place in a town that usually is very much established somewhere. So if you're thinking of the Dresden Files, like the Kim Harrison series, that's the Hollows. So it's all taking place, or even the Sookie Files. If you watch True Blood, it takes place in a city in, here near us, Shreveport. So you have those elements, and then you add in there to some layer of the magical world. So a lot of the times, most of the humans do not know there's a magical community. If they know, I think Kim Harrison has like an alternative, timeline, like it's alternative history in terms of that timeline. So they know that the supernatural is there. So think of all the amazing things that can happen in that supernatural world, layer underneath. And usually the main difference, and most people get urban fantasy confused with paranormal romance. Mm-hmm. Romance is not the main subject of urban fantasies. You're looking at a more action-packed, you're looking more adventures. You're looking, usually there's like sleuth detective. There's always some detective going on. There's always some mysteries and crimes. So it is the fantasy world usually mixed in with a little bit of the thriller, the suspense, more focus on your stories of finding a killer, finding something of a plot. Something's usually getting blown up. There is love components in urban fantasy, but it's not always the main emphasis for this one.
Wow.
Gotcha. Now, I love your series. I actually have all of them in regards to your urban fantasy series, which, if I'm not mistaken, has an awesome side character who is kind of a main character, is Constantine, who I happen to love. Would you mind explaining Constantine to them?
So for most people, I guess characters come out and you never think they're going to become a main character, let's be honest. Like Constantine was not supposed to be a main character. He was also not supposed to take over the series. So Constantine is a 5-dozen-year-old talking cat. And it's really based on like my little cat that recently passed away and my mother. Like, who bosses you around and judges you at the same time? For me, those two beings would be the ones that you can concentrate. So Constantine is 5,000 year old, from ancient Egypt, and he happens to be Death's ride or die, because somebody has to train Death's interns. So then, what I decided to expand my universe. So you have, the intern diaries, which is 5 novels, 3 novellas. We have some standalones in there, thrown in there. I wanted to continue to write. What I didn't want to do, because I might be a really lazy writer, was create a whole magical universe. I'm like, I'm not interested in developing new rules and new establishing that. So I decided to write it all in the same universe. So Constantine is that character that's going to be like your guide from one book to the other. So you have something in common. He might not show up, but people are always talking about him. There's always going to be this drop of Constantine name. He's like the name you're always going to drop if you know where you are. So that's kind of the part that ties a lot of my series together. That is the one character, because he's been around for 5,000 years old. So when I do short stories that happen to be an anthology, so happen to be an urban fantasy setting, Constantine's going to be somewhere in there, just so people can connect. I'm like, oh, it's in the same universe. Where am I at? So he makes it a little fun, and he's a cat. Like, let's be honest. Like, what else do you need to have some shenanigans going on? A cat.
And he's got attitude.
Oh my God.
Well, that was the best. I have to give you kudos. That was probably the best, most complete description of urban fantasy I've ever heard. Seriously, I mean, you covered every base there.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yes, ma'am.
Usually, I think that's one of the main questions that I always get is like, what is urban fantasy? And usually the next one is like, am I going to like it? It is very focused on the real world. So like most people, if you read my series, I'm going to say 90% of the buildings are going to be real. You can do a Google for Texarkana and you can walk the streets. And
Right.
like my goal in life, bucket list, just, if you meet the chambers, tell them, I want a walking tour of Texarkana based on my books. That's what it is. I want you to have the intern diary tours of Texarkana. You can have the little stops and have a marker. That's my goal here. But that's what urban fantasy is. You can Google, you can search, you can find this building. It's also the curse for urban fantasy, because if you make this real, you can't just not ignore history that happens in a location. You can't just decide like today, we're not talking about that. And that's kind of one of my first lessons writing my first book that happened. Like I put the Grimm Hotel and I was like, it's going to be great. And then I decided that there's going to be a huge battle in this building. And because at that time, I didn't realize that the building is haunted. And I was like, great, really? Like legit, like this building is haunted. So, and if you have an intern that's supposed to see ghosts, do we ignore the hunting of the ghosts? And I'm like, so a chapter had to get rewritten to add these huntings and these ghosts. And I'm spending half of my day doing research, like who died in this building and what happened and how to incorporate into the story, because I write urban fantasy. That's what you do. So lessons learned for me that day.
But you got to add it into the story, though.
Very much so. It's super fun. So people, you can do Google. So I have some of my beta readers and amazing alpha readers are notorious for checking the history of things, because that's what I do. Like I either do alternative history with Constantine. He has the rise of the Reapers takes place during the fall of the Roman Empire, right before the Dark Ages. So my whole entire concept is I blame Constantine for the Dark Ages. Just spoiler alert. So I have to do the fall of the Roman Empire. So there's a lot of research because it still be very, has to be placed in a setting. So he gets back to me. He's like, you actually nailed that. I'm like, I know, because I have people like you who will also go fact check me and be like, you didn't get this right. So things that you learn depending on your genre is like, how real can you be? I can get carried away with the magic. You can't get carried away with locations. People do not forgive that.
History is history. You got to keep
Right.
that legit.
You can twist it a little. Like there's some things, let's be honest, nobody really knows the details of what started some things. You can play around. You just have to have a battle that happened on that day.
Mhm.
What triggered the battle, like vampires and, Death's interns having a fight, you can kind of, get away with some of that.
Just a little.
Just a little. This is alternative history.
Myths are myths for a reason.
Yes, of course.
Do you find that people who, because I come across this, I'm sure you do as well, CJ, that people say, oh, that fantasy is just too fantastical for me as far as readers go. But when you have an urban fantasy where you actually have, like you were saying earlier, an actual real location, Texarkana is real, it's not made up, that they'll actually put a toe in the water there. Well, I might try that because it's sort of, they can sort of relate to the characters and locations, whereas fantasy sort of just straight fantasy just sort of scares them off.
My very first book, I usually tell them is very mundane magic. Like it starts you off really low level magic. Like she doesn't know nothing about the supernatural world. So I can kind of walk you in and slowly pull you into a very good gateway into the magical world. What I do tell, I do have people that do not like it at all. So normally, like if I'm at conventions, I'm like, it's like I really don't do this. Like I don't recommend the rest of the series. Like if you do not like it at all, this is progressively going to go more and more intense into the magic. Book one is, I have Death, who happens to be the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and some rogue witches. There's not that much of that. The longer you get into the series, it feels like there's less humans and more supernatural. And it's just kind of like that feel of it. So if you do not like the supernatural world when it comes to your books, Death in turn progressively gets more wild. So this is not the one. I usually send them to Cat Lady. I was like, I have a dark humor one. Let me send you this. Like Angela has nothing. She just has crazy cats. That's about it. But she happens to be, depressed cat lady turns arms dealer. Because somebody has to run the world. Why not her?
It's funny. I think fantasy, it just depends on partially your genre. Because there's the one that I'm writing, which is kind of like the Renaissance phase fantasy. If you like the Renaissance phase, you might like that one a little bit better. Because you're dealing with like King Arthur's time, and you can have a little more play with that. If you like this time period, you might like DC's a little bit better because it's this time period and you can play around with it a little bit more. So when it comes to fantasy, you have some play in the time periods. So it just depends on, do you want to stay in this time period or do you want to, go back in time a little bit more and have a little bit more play? So fantasy, it just kind of depends on, who you are and what time period you like too. So fantasy, have a little bit more play with that.
Some readers, when they see the word fantasy, they already have a predisposition as to what that is. Where and well, Alice don't read that. I'm fire.
Well, it can also be a different world,
right?
It
But with urban fantasy,
what I'm writing isn't even in this world.
But if you have urban fantasy, you can you sort of crack the door for those folks, which is kind of what I was getting at when I asked you that, DC, because it's been my experience that if you have a straight fantasy book like a Lord of the Rings type, that's too fantastical for me. But you mentioned the Dresden Files, something like that. Oh yeah, that might be something. And a lot of times I feel I've actually had people come back and talk that some of the books I've written that I classify as urban fantasy. Yeah, I really liked it. It surprised me, which is sort of a backhanded compliment, but okay. You got to read and you liked it, that's okay.
It gives them an opportunity to immerse themselves without feeling like they're doing high fantasy. Like high fantasy, there's so much you have to disconnect. And a lot of our readers tend to be very visual. So urban gives you something to ground yourself in. Like, I know what a building looks like. For us, if you're writing urban fantasy, you don't have to describe a lot of things. You know what a city looks like. Most high fantasy, you're going to describe every single leaf in that tree. You're like, I thought it was just a tree. Like, why do we care? Oh, it's purple. I'm sorry. Got it. Continue to describe it. Urban fantasy, I got a building and some trees, and you're going, yeah, I know what a building and some trees look like. I can do that. So it gives you that feel of grounding without having to go over explanations. And they can be like, I can relate. I know where I'm at. I think I can follow you so far. So yes.
Exactly. Mommy's joining us today. Hi, Mommy.
It makes it easier writing too, because you don't have to do the back matter explanation. Yeah, building's a building. A tree is a tree. Yeah, it's a good point.
It makes it a little easier to play, but also you have to be careful because there's some things you can't break. Like how much laws of gravity can I pull off? Oh, and then how much your magical, system's supposed to get away with some things. So you get to explain some things and some details without going too crazy. So yes.
Now, Mombi actually brings up something else. She says, love DC's fiction and currently enjoying her Bible study too. DC has other things that she actually has under her belt. She has the Crazy Cat Lady, which I happen to love. But you also have a devotional and you have children's books as well. And you actually have a YA series. Would you mind explaining the other things that you have on your belt?
So I am probably the ADD kid that can't make up their mind. So I write like I read. Let's just be honest. So I tend to write the things that I love and that I'm passionate about, which makes it very diverse. And sometimes I feel like if you come to my tables now, I'm being more strategic. Like if I'm going to a fantasy event, I only bring fantasy books and some cat ladies. Like I tend to be very specific. When I first started doing it, I brought it all. And people would literally be like, so where's the other person? I'm like, no, just me, just all of me. And they're like, oh, well then. So I do have a series that is devotional and I'm on a Monday motivation. One of the things that I really enjoy is how do you inspire people? How do you connect with people? How do you get people really excited about their process? And books to me is the way. Like I have a motivation all about self-care, self-healing. It's like, dare to believe, dare to love, dare to hope. And the concept behind is like finding yourself in your space and kind of healing yourself. So that was a really fun books to write, but interesting because at the times like, how does the girl who's writing about demons and angels and blowing up the world here, now I have a whole devotional series. So
Uh,
that to me became it was a much more struggle for myself than my readers, because my readers like, but you are very spiritual, like you can see that in your writing, you play with these themes, you have all this love and hope. So they were very okay with the series. I wasn't. I was like, can I pull that off? It took me some time to get over myself. Same thing with like my Charlie books. I have a couple books that are a little bit more spicy, so I put those all really far away because let's be honest, Charlie can't be involved in that. Like, let's leave Charlie on the other side of the table. So I have a children's collection, which is Charlie's Fables, and they're for my nephews. I have two gorgeous nephews that I really want them to know how amazing they are now, not when they're like 35 and 40. So that collection came to that. Like every single series that I have done has meant for somebody or like a purpose. Like my YA, I have Madison, who happens to have been bullied, and so that's a little bit more high fantasy because she ends up in another world altogether. And you have a little bit of Merlin and knights and all that stuff. But that's very YA because I had a whole bunch of youth that I was their youth minister for a while. And I really wanted a book that they could pick up, that it was very focused on like that teen era that they could kind of be like, if I was Madison, where would I end up be? So kind of those things. So when I write series and books that I love, and I do love YA reading, do I usually have somebody in mind? Like I have a kid in mind, or I have an adult, or I have a person that I want them to go on this journey with me. So usually, well, there's not a dedication for that. Like I'm writing specifically for somebody.
Mombi says, relatable. LOL. ADHD brings grief.
Absolutely.
I hear you. I'm a multi-genre author myself. I look at it as kind of as a challenge. All mine are Christian fiction, but they're different genres within the Christian fiction zone. And so I kind of look at it as a challenge. What's my next genre within that zone?
That's pretty cool. I don't think I ever saw the writing as a challenge, just because I'm very dark comedy. So everything I write has a very edge of dark humor. There's tons of quirky characters. So if it doesn't feel natural, I don't tend to play with it, if that makes any sense. I'm just very much into it.
yeah.
I'm planning a new pen name, maybe. That should be interesting.
I have a strange term for it. It's like, I like them all.
Okay.
But it's like, can I do it? So they're sci-fi, paranormal, time travel. I mean, they're all my zone. Romance, currently writing fantasy. So, I mean, you can see they all fit me, but it's like the challenge of writing something different. So I'm not in the same
zone all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you write, I think authors are creative people, obviously.
I don't want to get bored.
No, but I do think that if you look at mainstream authors, they do tend, how do I put this, to become a little stale because they write. If you read, for example, one Jack Reacher book, you pretty much have the plot for everyone to follow. So
it's easy marketing.
I know what if Murder She Wrote, where she interviews the first person and then goes to the next three, and it ends up being the person that she interviewed.
One of the things, and I've realized it becomes a formula.
Yes.
And without downplaying the formula, a lot of readers enjoy it. It's like that predictability.
Yes,
it makes that cozy book very predictable. Like cozy, I love cozy mysteries.
Yeah, but I don't want to be formulaic. I like the surprise in the books. and I like being unpredictable in my books.
So the fun thing about it is, I think that's why readers pick different authors. So when they get tired of one genre, they can go pick another. As an author, I'm very much like you,
I
CJ.
think that's why they like my books though, because I like the unpredictability of it. They're like, oh my gosh, just when I thought the book was done, there's another curveball thrown at me. And I'm just like, well, that's me. People either love me or they hate me. That's the thing I like about mine.
Well, it gets stale if you just write, if you stay in the same lane for everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just gets stale after a while. I mean, if you are very successful, you're making tons of money off it, but the old adage is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But still, after a while, I mean, you get into writing because, as you've mentioned, DC, and I know, same with CJ, is, it's not just a challenge, it's things that you do that you enjoy, and your mind might go off in different directions. This is a good idea for that, or this is a good idea for this story. And if you have to write the same story in the same format with the same model over and over again, it kind of loses the enjoyment of writing it as an author. Nevertheless, whether or not you're successful, sell a bunch of books, but I understand exactly what you're saying, exactly, because it's the way I feel.
Here's the weird part about it. There's a double-edged sword. If you get stuck writing in the same genre over and over, jumping genres outside, it's hard for your readers to follow. Like they get very accustomed to that. At the same time, if you do it early in your career, it doesn't have the same feel. They're not surprised. Like you have a 20-book series and today you're going to write romance and they're like, wait, where did that come from? What just happened? So you have to decide, I think, to me, especially for authors, early on, I'm like, if you're going to do multiple genres, introduce them early enough so it doesn't feel such a jaded situation that your reader's like, I can't transition. At this point in my career, if you do it early enough, nobody really thinks about it like, oh, she's going to write something else. If they fall in love with your writing, they're going to follow you along. If you're fairly established in an author and a writing and in a universe, sometimes it's really hard. Like I have some of my favorite authors that have written Avis series and I'm like, I don't know if I like this one. And I can't switch. Like I'm so used to like 15, 16 books in this world, which I don't do often, but the ones that do, so that when they transition, it takes me a while to hear their voices somewhere else because I'm used to just only writing this part. So that's kind of curses that we must look as author is. If you're going to be multi-genre, if you're going to take the leap, think about it early. But if you're traditionally published, most publishers do not want that. They're not interested in you dabbling in places like this is where the money's coming. We're going to stay with the money. So it makes you very stuck in these like boundaries.
But I don't understand that because they don't pigeonhole actors or actresses in one specific genre. Why
they do? But they do. Think it is a strategic decision for actors to step away. Think of the romantic comedy ones. Like if you think about some of the successful ones, most of them are very typecast in very specific roles.
And they hate it though. Some of them hate it.
This is why they usually leave Hollywood. But we get used to, they get used to, here's my romantic comedy person. Like Matthew McConaughey said in his interview that it took him 3 years.
True. Action, person forward. No, now that I think about it, that's true. Yeah.
So it took Matthew, he said, 3 years.
Normal.
Without a job in order to break out of like the romantic comedy and be able for Hollywood to see him something else. Like he could not get a job if it wasn't in that category. So they get typecast all the time.
And I don't like it. It would drive me crazy.
So DC, let me ask you a question because we have a lot of authors. A lot of authors are would-be authors, writers. So you've written a number of series in different, that goes in different directions. So if you have a young writer or someone that is new to writing, do you recommend they dive right in to write a series, or would you recommend they start with a standalone book to sort of get their feet wet before they take on perhaps the greater challenge of a series?
So I'm going to give you a very weird, bizarre answer. First, you have to decide if you are a series author or a standalone, because those are different authors altogether. Like I'm going to tell you, as a reader, I enjoy series, even if it's 3 books, just because I enjoy the characters and I want to commit. I can do a trilogy. Not every author is meant to write a series, and not every author is meant just to do a standalone. So that is a very personal decision. Like I have a friend who decides, I'm not doing series. I don't have the attention span, and I don't care enough about these characters to continue multiple books. Like once they have one book, that story is done, and they don't want to hear about it. Like they have moved on to something else. So the first thing that you have to decide is, can you commit? It has nothing to do whether you want to get your feet wet or not. Is can you commit? If you decide to do a series, I will recommend, believe it or not, something I don't normally do, especially if you're new, do yourself the favor and write the whole series before you start publishing. Okay. Here's the reason, and I mentor a lot of young authors, and I say young in their career specifically. This is what I tell them. The most fun you will ever have as an author is a writing process. Once you start publishing, our role gets so complicated that you automatically are going to have to split your brains between publishing, promoting, and selling and having a business. So if you really want to enjoy the process, enjoy it before you start pressing the button to publish, and just enjoy that world. A lot of series never get finished because we're so busy trying to promote and do all the things that we just run out of time. Like we're just so burnt out and series just drag. I have a couple of those in that category that I'm like, this is the year to finish the series. And they're like, how many? I was like, I'm about 4 series that got to get finished. They're like, girl, I'm like, I know. So something to think about. If they're going to do series, do the whole series before you start publishing and then going from there.
A couple quick questions. Number 1, are you a planner or are you a pantser?
Oh, I am absolutely a planner. Yes.
Okay. Number 2, if you were to give advice to somebody who wanted to start writing urban fantasy, what would you give them?
Do research, believe it or not. Start reading urban fantasy. Figure it out what's actually... Urban fantasy is a very evergreen genre. It's not the hot and coming. It doesn't have those amazing hot things that TikTok is talking about. We're like the really low-key underground one. It's been here for a while. We're going to be here for a while. We're just kind of like a little clique. You just have to join the clique. So do research, find out what urban fantasy authors you enjoy, and then research locations that you want to plot. And like, where do you want to have your shenanigans take place?
Okay, cool. And my question number 3, if people want to find you online, how can they find you?
So right now I'm hanging out in Substack. It is actually on the bottom, but you can check out my website, which is dcgomez-author.com. So I'm active in Substack. So if you want to chat and talk to me, come and hang out at DC Gomez, which is super fun. That's kind of the main easy place. I guess TikTok. I'm posting back on TikTok. So you can come and hang out on TikTok too.
Gotcha. I'm following you there too. I'm following you on both of them. So DC, thank you so much for joining us today. You are always a treat to have on. Love having you here and there.
A pleasure. I love you both. Thank you so much. And have an amazing con, Mike. It's going to be fabulous. It's the season of the con. So yes, enjoy.
Now your cons are announced on your Substack and on your TikTok, correct?
Yes, which I realized I have one next week and I didn't remember. So I will be at CypherCon in Lake Charles next week.
Okay, cool.
So it should be fabulous. So if you're in Louisiana, come and see me. We're going to have a blast.
Cool. Next week, we'll be having Dana Wayne, who is the president of the Northeast Texas Writers Association. So we'll be having her on next week. We had her back in February. We're having her back on. Yes, Mombi says it is definitely con season. So yep, the con season has started, is kicked off, and it is going hardcore right now. So make sure to, like I said, mark your calendars for several cons that I mentioned in the beginning of this particular episode. But make sure to check out DC Gomez. You can find our Substacks at DCGomez. You can also check her out on TikTok. And you can check us out. Our links are in the chat and they're in the Facebook chat as well. And check us out next week. We will have, as I said, Dana Wayne from East Texas Writers Association. Same time, same sandbox. We'll see you guys next week. Same time. Bye-bye. Bye.